plan, some things like that. But I really want to click on some of these tabs and show you the potential. So if we click on coal here, you can see on the left-hand side, it talks about Utah's coal resources. There's a little video and a little bit of information about Utah's coal. And this is the setup for each one of these tabs. Then you come over here to the map and you can see where our coal resources are. Our coal deposits are found here in gray. And then where you see these black smokestacks, that is where our coal-fired power plants are. Moving on to petroleum. As you probably all know well, sitting on this board, these are where our petroleum resources are located, and then these, of course, are where our wells are, and then this yellow building right here is refineries. So you can click through all of these and see some wonderful resources to learn more about our state and what we're doing. And I'll leave that to you all later on, but it's a good resource. Oops. Just 1 second. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our state energy plan that was released in May. Under legislation, our office is required to update our state energy plan every 10 years so that we are making sure that we're looking out to the future and not being stuck in the past. As part of creating this plan, we visited 20 counties. We held 3 open houses and online comment period. Those open houses were in Vernal, Beaver, and Salt Lake County. We had 10 targeted stakeholders that helped give input to this, and then we had a policy and a technical team that gave insight as well. When you go to the state energy plan, that of course is housed on our website, this will come up and you'll see these 8 separate tabs. There's a letter from the governor, our energy commitments, our executive summary. Energy in Utah is really the story map. It'll take you straight to the story map. But then these other ones, tabs 5, 6, and 7, really get into the heart of what we're doing in our energy plan and what it means. As I mentioned, this is on our website because it's a living document. We believe in our office that more is going to happen in the next 5 years in energy than has happened in the previous 50 combined. And so we want to be able to adapt and adjust it on the go. So these are 6 key commitments from the energy plan. First one, any of the above, as I mentioned before. Utah is committed to an any of the above energy future, supporting efforts and policies that provide a variety of tools and resources that citizens, communities, businesses, and industries can choose from to deliver or obtain affordable, reliable energy. Our second commitment is energy independence. Utah is committed to American energy independence, pursuing policies and actions that enable more domestic energy development and enhance global energy security. We've all seen how important that is, especially with what's going on in Russia and the needs going on in Europe. We want to make sure that we are energy independent. 3, pragmatic climate solutions. Utah is committed to pragmatic, market-driven climate solutions that enable innovation energy production. This includes a focus on supporting Utah-based research and development, ensuring we stay good stewards of our environment for future generations of Utah. 4, supporting rural communities. Utah is committed to supporting rural communities through economic development and diversification efforts, infrastructure investment, and workforce training and development. 5, clean energy future. Utah is committed to supporting a clean energy future through a strong and responsible mining program for critical minerals, investment in emerging energy technologies such as hydrogen storage and energy efficiency, and air quality research and incentive programs. And then lastly, partner collaboration. Utah is committed to collaboration with its local, regional, and federal partners to ensure infrastructure and innovation projects such as EV charging, transmission, emerging fuel hubs, and coal community support and diversification. One thing I'm going to mention just quickly on that last point there is emerging fuel hubs. We are engaged with an MOU with 3 other states, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Colorado, to apply for hydrogen hub funding for the state of Utah. This hydrogen hub will be an ecosystem that not only includes production only, but production, transmission, storage, and then of course use. And we're very excited for what's coming with that. We are waiting right now for more information from the federal government so that we can begin applying for that, but we're working diligently with our state partners. This all began when our governor and the governor of Colorado collaborated and found that there was a lot of opportunities for us to engage with one another. So with that, that's a huge overview. There's a lot of information there, but I'm happy to take any questions and answer what I can.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Board members, any questions? Yes, Ms. Sarah.
I just wanted to make an observation. In my previous life, had an opportunity to work with you all with Department of Defense and bringing together the various partners with Hill Air Force Base, mainly the renewable energy interests, to really build together a solid partnership, to make sure they were all working together and they would minimize conflicts in terms of renewable projects and the priorities for the Air Force priorities that they had. So I think working with all the different stakeholders, the U.S. Geological Survey, we were able to put together a very interactive map and help provide the necessary information. So I think it was a great tribute to you all for providing that opportunity for the stakeholders.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments on the part of the board? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to the next item. Thank you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And we have engaged in discussions recently with Matt's office about collaborating on workshops and educational resources for teachers and schools in Utah. So we'll be pursuing that during the current year. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, and I'm going to give a little bit of background on this. Monthly, we have meetings internally trying to identify those resources, monetary resources and funding sources that the division needs in order to do its work. As you know, the coal program and the AMR program are highly federally funded through grants from Department of Interior. Oil and gas program has traditionally been run off of what is called the conservation tax, which is a tax on production, which is 0.2% on the production value. Our minerals program has principally been generally funded with a small amount of dedicated credits that come from fees that we charge the operators and permittees in the state. But that changed, I think, with it was the general session of 2021, and it actually allowed us to obtain revenue from severance tax, which was not something we had the advantage of doing in the past. But as part of that statutory change, we no longer get general funds. So we are completely funded by either federal grants or the conservation fee for oil and gas, or through the severance taxes, the percentage of severance taxes that were allocated through that statutory change. We're doing well, and I think some of that has to do with the price of commodities that have gone up substantially in the last year. And John Rogers helps us identify and project out what those revenue streams are for the division so that we can properly manage our allocated resources, make sure we're performing efficiently within our budget. But one of the things I asked John to do here recently is, could he analyze what revenue streams go to the entire state? And I think what John has showed to me is pretty amazing from my point of view. But I thought it would be good for him to share that information with you so that you could get an understanding now, not only what the division relies on, but what the state gets from taxes, royalties, and things like that. So with that, John is one of our environmental program managers within the division, and I'll turn the time over to him.
Thank you, John. Good morning, Acting Chairman Borden and members of the board. As John said, we meet on a monthly basis, and I do a monthly forecast, and I look at futures of oil and gas, I look at production, and I try to come up with a number And it is a forecast for the current year and then 2 years down the road, just to see where we're headed. And, it's based a lot on production and pricing. As we know in this industry, that's up and down all the time, but at least it gives us a ballpark where we're headed for the year. So as John mentioned, he said, what are the other dollars we're looking at too? We were mostly focused on what we're getting just for the division, but we're taking now a broader approach to what does the whole state, including the state, local government, local taxing entities, counties, and it's pretty impressive. So before you go to sleep, and I say taxes and fees, just hold on there for a few minutes and you'll be very impressed by the end of what you think, what we get from this extractive industries. So I will start here with the oil and gas severance tax. Oil and gas severance tax is something that's always been out there, and it is taxed on $3. Let's see, it's 3% on the first $13 on a barrel of oil and gas, and above $13, it's 5% incrementally. So roughly on a $100 barrel oil, you're paying about 4.7% severance tax. Then there's a lot of deductions that the tax commission goes through, for processing, transportation, this and that, but that's a significant amount. So as we look at this, the fiscal year 19, 20, and 21, those are the dollars we see actually is the top line. How this money is divided out is 18 to 20% of this, it varies from year to year. There's very complex calculations that the tax commission does, goes to the oil and gas severance tax permanent trust fund. Another 15 to 20% goes to the Uintah Basin Revitalization Fund. And that is it's more like you think of a property tax on oil and gas produced on tribal lands. And then as you look at the Navajo revitalization funds, it's 1 to 7%. So after those deductions are taken out, there's a 55-60% of that top number remaining. And this is what John talked to us about it was 2021 Senate Bill 133. We now get a portion of that. So on the oil and gas side, the division gets 18% of that remaining number. And then also there are amounts that go to UGS gets 2.5%, DAQ gets 2.75, DWQ gets 0.4, and I'll talk about mining as we get to that section, but they get 11.5 on the mining part, which is a different number. It's not connected to oil and gas. So as you can see here, oil and gas is significant in the severance tax, and it's vital, and it's now a safety net for us because we now get that. And our first flow from this fund we just received was, let me get this right, $8.2 million for this last year. So very significant, a nice safety net to have there, because in the past, we were operating on whatever we get from the conservation fee, and it's very volatile. So that is the oil and gas severance tax. As we move on, we have the oil and gas conservation fee, which John alluded to. You can see back in 19, it was 4.5 million, 21, 2.6. It's tough to survive on 2.6 when your appropriation is over $4 million. So you have tough times. I think this is what drove us to have more of a safety net there to what we could have there. We now also have a bill that was passed in 2016, a reserve fund. Historically, before that time, we only could keep $750,000 in reserve. And I remember when things went south, when oil dropped dramatically, we went through our reserve fund almost instantly. So now it was our reserve fund is now up to 1 year's appropriation, which is now significant. The key to having 1 year's appropriation is you have to have money to fill that. And in the past few years, we've not had enough to fill that. This year, we will have money to put in that reserve fund to keep us afloat in tough times. And as we all know in this business, we're seeing good times now, but they change rapidly. So that's the conservation fee. And as John alluded to, that's 0.2% of the product sold less deductions as calculated by the tax commission. And we get a monthly allocation on that. So we're always waiting to see what the paycheck's going to be for that month. Okay. Oil and gas state royalties, bonuses, and lease payments. These fall into two. First, there's SITLA, and you can see that's significant from oil and gas. 34 million, almost 35 million in 19, dropped off with the COVID year, 21. And then state lands, which is minor in the oil and gas side of it, gets a few dollars there. But those are dollars go directly to SITLA and state lands. And Levon, I believe you recognize from me how important oil and gas is to SITLA. So that's the oil and gas side on there. Next, we want to look at the mineral side, mineral severance tax. It is different than oil and gas, and it's taxed on just metallurgical minerals, and there's a list in the statute of what minerals it's paid on. But again, they have a mineral severance tax permanent trust fund, which 25 to 30% goes into that. The remainder is a 70 to 75%, and you can see that range in the 13, 14 range. And so that is what the division gets. They get they get 11.5% of that number, and that's on minerals. So that goes to support the mineral program. Okay, then we look at mineral state royalties, bonuses, and lease payments. SITLA in the range of 7 to 8.5 million, and state lands is much higher on the mineral side because most likely because of the salt on the Great Salt Lake production. Now we have entities are combined. The tax commission, and this is where I get a lot of this information from tax commission and other entities like SITLA. They did not break down some of this by oil and gas and by mining. So I combine these. But centrally assessed property on natural resource property, you can see there is $122 million in 19, 107 in 21. It's a significant amount. And the way centrally assessed property works, just as we pay taxes on our cars and our homes, the state assesses property tax on an entity of a mine, an oil well, and then they're taxed upon that value of it. The goal is to determine fair market value, which is a challenge in itself. But you can think of the value of a property like a large oil field, Kennecott, is significant. So those are the dollars that are combined for oil and gas and mining. And then they are distributed to the county where those properties are located on a local basis. So they're assessed by the state, but the county does the collection and the taxes go to the county. Next, we have combined oil and gas mining on federal leases. These are bonus payments and lease payments and royalties that come back from operating on federal lands. So they get 50% back to the state, and those are significant too there. As you look at 77 to 49, of course 21 we had a downturn with pricing, but I'm thinking when 22 comes out, those dollars will be significant. So that is very important. That comes back to the community impact board, and they divvy it out on how they seem fit. So it's a significant amount. Now, combined oil and gas and mining mineral production withholding tax. This is interesting in that this is taxes paid that the companies withhold for a royalty owner that they make on their income. So essentially is like an income tax on mineral production, but it still is a number that is derived from oil and gas. And so you can see there, that's also very significant, 28 to 16 million. And then sales tax. That's not sales tax on the sale of oil and gas. It's a sale tax on equipment. And the tax commission just qualifies this as mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction. So they come up with a gross number, just as sales tax that you pay on your groceries or whatever else. That's the gross number. And then it has a local rate applied to it. So I just used a 6.25 because you really can't find a number that fits all entities. But this is the number I come up with. And they didn't have 21 out yet. So I estimated for a downturn in 21 about 10 million. But still significant dollars. And it goes back to the local taxing districts. So overall, bottom line, in the last 3 years, we can see the significant effect of dollars that flow to the state, to local communities, to counties, from 343 million back in 19. Of course, we had a downturn in 21, 261, but I'm thinking in 22, we'll see a significant rise there. So as we look at this, this is a very, very significant dollars that flow through the state. And again, I want to emphasize this is only direct cash flow to the state. It doesn't take into account the impact on the local communities due to hotels, restaurants, retail sales, housing, income taxes paid by workers that work at these operations, income tax paid by the corporations themselves. It's a significant impact to the overall economy of Utah and the local areas in which these operate. So there are some things to take out of here. First of all, as I alluded, it's significant dollars that flow to the state. Second of all, it has a powerful effect on our overall economy. And none of this happens without a notice of intent to permit to mine, starting with DLGM, or an APD from the oil and gas side to drill a well. It all starts here with permits and oversight by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. So I hope those numbers, they surprised me, to be honest with you. And so I think it emphasizes the value of the work we do here in the division. So I'll take any questions you have any.
Thank you for that. Very impressive, big numbers. And you're right, it does exclude a lot of those secondary benefits of contractors, of purchases made for consumables at the businesses and things like that also contribute to the economy. Any comments or questions on the board's part? Yes, Mr. Church.
John, I noticed the single highest contributor is property tax. So the other, a lot of the income is on leases, on production. Property tax, you said that would be very difficult to assess the value of properties, whether mining or oil and gas. Is it done on the estimated reserves in the property, do you think? And who calculates, do they use the company's estimate of what they report as reserves, or is there a state organization that evaluates?
Well, I can tell you that with experience. I managed that group over there at the Tax Commission for a long time. Okay. It's called the Natural Resource Valuation. And they divide things up into sand and gravel, metals, non-metals, oil and gas. On the oil and gas side, they do a discounted cash flow. And so you basically are saying, what is this property worth? And so years ago, they were just kind of had a formula out there. They did 5 times production, and it didn't really approach it. So what they're trying to get at is market value. So let's say, Mr. Church, you were working for one of your oil companies. They said, we want to buy a property. You'd go in there and analyze the reserves. You'd say, what is this going to produce in the next lifetime of this? They do a decline curve. They try to forecast prices, which is the most difficult part. They discount it back to the present, and that's the value of that property, and then they're taxed on it, just as the value of a car, a value of a home. And so that's how they do oil and gas. It's similar with the mining properties, and it's a very difficult, and to come up with. And generally what happens in this is they come up with a value, and of course the company says, well, we think it's different. So there's a lot of give and take. Eventually they come to a number. If not, they go before the board, what they call it, the tax commission entity, and it's presented there much in a judicial hearing like this to say what's right, what's wrong. So it is very complex, but they try to get the best number they can. And that's why they do it at that level, because the individual counties, a county assessor could not put that kind of study and analysis into it. And also, a lot of the information does come from the company. Just like when you do your own personal tax return, you provide a lot of information. They provide things on the reservoir, on the reserves, and that mention. So that's how it's done. But it is a significant number, and you look at that. It's like, for example, Mr. Borden, if you had to ask you the question, how much is Kennecott worth? A tough question, isn't it?
Very much so.
And so that's why it's very much a lot of science, a lot of accounting, a lot of appraising techniques involved. So.
Thank you. That was a very informed answer. Okay. Appreciate it.
Anyone else, board members?
Yeah, could I just comment on the SITLA revenue? Because Utah is unique in its organization. The lands traditionally called state lands are set aside in Utah for the benefit mostly of the school children in Utah. So a percentage of that $30 million every year goes directly to support schools and gives them the only discretionary money they have in their budgets, and very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
If I can just make a comment, I mean, the work that John did in this regard you can see it's not that easy to do. Sometimes it's a hard analysis to look at where all these revenue streams come from, where they all go. I too was impressed by the size of this number when we're talking about the total value to state entities of anywhere from 25% to 33% of $1 billion is just remarkable to me. And I think if the general public understood what the value was to the state of these extractive industries, there might be more support out there for what is going on in the world. But this is only part of what John does for me. Another part of what he does is he tries to look into the future and get out his crystal ball and speculate on and forecast what will the numbers be, because that's another part of our job, is not only to say this is what the means which we have to live under, but what's going to happen in the future and how do we prepare for that. And that is a much harder job to do. I think John would probably attest that some of it is guesswork, some of it is informed, looking at other forecasts that economic analysts have put together. But and that's not something we like to publicize, because frankly, those numbers have a lot more risk in them. So we do it for our own purposes, but we try not to say, well, this is what we think the industries are going to do in the next year, because we've generally been wrong when we've tried to do that. With that, we're both happy to answer any other questions, or we can just move on with the agenda. Mr. Moon.
So this year is going to be a good year, obviously. And anything over that $1 million that you can put in that savings, this goes back to the state.
I mean, from the conservation fee, yeah, that we get the 1 year's appropriation, which right now is what, about four and a half?
Yeah.
So anything above 4.5 will go back to the state, where historically it was over 750,000. So we'll get to keep more. And that basically having 1 year's appropriation gives you a 1 year operating window when things go south, if they do. Hopefully we don't. But so that's significant. And then we have the severance tax to work with too, which is huge for us.
And the excess severance tax that you don't spend, you save that thing.
Well, I think the way the statute was written, the monies that were allocated from the severance tax are non-lapsing. So that can continue to build over time if it's unspent. But as John said, that, the severance tax, 55 to 60% is going to the state for funding purposes that are not allocated to other entities.
And I maybe didn't clarify this, but there's a portion, there's mineral severance tax, which the mining program gets that, 11.5%. And then there's the oil and gas, which is 18%, but they come to us combined. So they're not, to calculate it, that's how they do it, but it comes to us under one entity, oil, gas, and mining, which is nice.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Under other items, I've already mentioned the collaborative meeting we had in July. And again, thanks to Mr. Moon for participating and moderating the panel of industry representatives. I think if you go back and look at the recording, you might find some surprises in that. I think industry, at least the oil and gas industry in the Uintah Basin, is highly optimistic about their future out there. And they're very encouraged by what they're seeing in the horizontal drilling realm. If John were to go into some of his numbers on production, we're seeing production climb pretty regularly, monthly through the year. So I think we have a pretty good outlook for additional development in the Uintah Basin for the coming years. The other thing I was going to bring up under other items, and something occurred last month while you were having your board meeting. It was the Groundwater Protection Council annual forum that took place in Salt Lake City. And I know we had several board members registered for that. You couldn't go the day that you were having your board meeting, but hopefully you availed yourselves of some of the other program items. I think Mr. Walker was there. I think Levon was there for part of the time. But I thought I'd just mention to you real quickly my impressions of that. I mean, that is a national forum. And number one, it was great to have many other states come to Utah to have a conference and to talk about things that are important to the extractive industries, the protection of groundwater, injection practices. And to tie this in with the collaborative meeting, we had a report from the executive director of the Groundwater Protection Council who talked about Utah's role in the council, but also the fact that we are a significant player in the data systems, data development game that's going on throughout the United States. There are some things we're doing with inspection prioritization and orphan well and idle well prioritization that other states are looking at and saying, hey, we want to do that too. And the beauty of the Groundwater Protection Council is that they have this data system that gets shared among the states. And for whatever investment a state puts in, other states can take advantage of that, those modules that are put together. We've taken advantages of things that Montana has developed or Colorado has developed or California or Texas, and they're doing the same with us. But I think the message that I got from the representative who came to the collaborative meeting was that Utah's a big player in that system. So we have a reputation out there that we're trying to uphold at this point. But the other thing I took from the annual forum was there were a lot of discussions on Class 6. There's a Class 6 task force that GWPC has put together in order to help states with their applications for primacy to the EPA. There's some training modules that are going to be coming out very soon that the states can avail themselves of. We talked about technical issues and technological issues associated with injection of CO2 for sequestration. It was just I would say almost half the agenda was devoted to Class 6 and CO2 sequestration. And then I had a small role to play as a moderator for a panel on produced water, which is another significant thing that we'll have to look at over the next few years in Utah. If our production increases the way the operators are suggesting, we'll also see a increase in the amount of water that's going to come out of the ground. And currently we're managing that water, produced water effectively through either underground injection wells or surface evaporative ponds. But if that volume increases significantly over the years, we could be facing some of the same things that the Permian Basin is facing, and it would overwhelm the infrastructure that we have in place. So we need to plan ahead, and we need to take steps now to be prepared for when that actually happens. So I think those are a couple of the bigger messages I took from the Groundwater Protection Council meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but just to highlight maybe some of the things that you may have missed when that was in town last month.
Director Baza, you mentioned the produced water issues in the Permian Basin. How are they dealing with the substantially larger flows that they deal with?
They've done some different things. I'm not sure that they've got a cure for it. A big part of produced water is the high cost of treating it to remove the things that are in it. And the highest cost option obviously is to treat it for use in water systems, whether agricultural or otherwise. So there's a certain amount of that being done. There's some statutory and regulatory efforts the state of Texas has made to try to say, you know, we're going to allow more of this water to be used, say for salt tolerant crops, things like that. But I don't know that they've got any good answers. I mean, the volumes continue to grow, and the best thing the operators can do with it is put it back in the ground. But one of the things that the Permian has faced both in Texas and in New Mexico is induced seismicity that occurs when you inject so much of this fluid into the ground that it changes the behavior of the rocks underground. So again, I can't say that they've found a good solution. They're trying to manage it the best they can, but it's a big problem for them.
Thank you. Mr. Church?
Just a comment, Director Baza. I attended the council, and it was very apparent to me the leadership role that you and the division have with the council, and I wanted to congratulate you on that, and also express appreciation for broadcasting live the collaborative meetings. And as the Groundwater Council there reported on Utah's role, it was very apparent of their appreciation of the division also. And so I appreciate that you made that available, the broadcast, so I could attend remotely very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mr. Acting Chairman.
I have one thing too. I just want to comment on John's comments. John's being very modest about the reputation of Utah. Very apparent from attending that conference and other things that Utah's a leader in things like orphan wells. My goodness, you can't even find one to do some research on, and the data management thing with RBDMS. When I was in California, they had consultants from the oil, or our division here out there, helping California get its data management system up and going. So, and also the amount of staff you have here is what you get accomplished is pretty remarkable. California has 200 oil and gas engineers, and you have a handful here to do a very significant job. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. We appreciate those comments tremendously. Well, Mr. Borden, as far as today's agenda goes, that pretty much concludes the division's presentation. I'll just point out to you that we have our regularly scheduled board meetings in August and September coming up. The division does have a annual achievement award. We kind of refer to it as our summer picnic, where we recognize employees within the division for significant effort and contributions for their work. I would invite board members who want to participate in that. It's going to be at a park out in West Valley City on the 18th of August. And if you are interested in participating, please let me know so we have a head count for lunch. But I invite you to attend that if you're available. With that, I'll turn the time back over to you. And I know that there were several people in the audience I met earlier who wanted to make public comment at this point. So the time is yours, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Baza. Yes, now is the time we typically give the public an opportunity to comment on issues pertinent to the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining. Could I get a show of hands for anybody that would like to speak today? Excellent. Could you please approach the microphones one at a time, state your name, and give us a brief description of the issue that you want to discuss?
Can you hear me okay right here? Do I need to get closer to the mic? A little bit. Okay. My name is Joseph Ryman. a long-term resident of Mount Air Canyon. I've been going up the canyon for over 65 years. I'm second generation. And a lot of things have been discussed regarding the potential for a mine on the south side of Interstate 80 in Parley's Canyon. But the one issue I believe has been neglected has been safety, public safety, and that is the potential wildfire. As a Mount Air Canyon homeowner, I've been forced to evacuate out of the canyon on 3 different occasions in the past 20 years from nearby wildfires in Parley's and Mill Creek canyons. As unpleasant as these experiences were, nothing concerns me more than to have a new quarry 1/4 miles away with up to 140 heavy laden ore trucks passing daily by the only exit point out of Mount Air Canyon. And I've got an attachment with this. I'll leave the entire folder with you, for your consumption. By inserting the proposed South Quarry coordinates, latitude, longitude, into the Department of Natural Resources own website, the Wildfire Risk Portal, or Assessment Portal, the entire quarry shows up as being very high risk for wildfire. And we know Parley's Canyon has had wildfires every year for the last 3 years, including this year. We know Parley's Canyon will burn. This is not anything that can be, I think, challenged. But I can't understand how Granite Construction can possibly avoid massive lawsuits should a wildfire originate from excavating the drought impacted landscape of this quarry site, or the transportation of ore, which might trap over 100 people in Mount Air Canyon. It could be much more than that on a weekend or a holiday. We only have one way in, one way out. Our only means of escape, if we cannot exit into Parley's Canyon, is to drive as far as we can and hike over the ridge into Mill Creek Canyon. And this is over Forest Service land, over mostly unimproved trails, or, it's tough going. It's basically bushwhacking. We've already been in touch with Unified Fire over this issue and had a Zoom meeting with them in the last couple of weeks ago, and probably need to connect with the Utah Department of Public Safety as far as also examining the possibility of helicopter evacuations, because if we can't get out, helicopters might be our only possibility. I only know of one potential site in Upper Mount Air Canyon where I think smaller helicopters could possibly get in to help evacuate people. Certainly nothing on the size of the Black Hawk helicopters that the Army Reserve have out in West Jordan. And I know something about helicopters. I'm a retired pilot. I worked at one time for Rocky Mountain Helicopters down in Provo, flying fixed wing support for helicopters. So I was involved sometimes even going out on training missions with them. But I find that this is not a good option. And if there's smoke or wind in the area, a helicopter evacuation is not good. So the possibility of having people trapped in the canyon is a major safety issue. I also find it interesting that currently Rocky Mountain Power is spending millions of dollars, and they're currently in the canyon and have been doing so since the snow melted, running power lines underneath our road into the canyon so that they're not subject to the risk of having overhead power lines come down and start a wildfire. So they recognize their risk in this, and they're obviously aware of the multiple wildfires which were blamed on Pacific Gas and Electric of California, which caused the ultimate bankruptcy of that company after they were found to be negligent in this. And I find it odd that the Granite Construction would consider going into this area. I know from experience that the wind sometimes blows up Parley's Canyon in very strong, and winds tend to drive wildfires. I don't think it would be a matter of maybe only minutes if a wildfire started on the quarry site and was driven by wind up the canyon. It could close us off in mere minutes. I was forced to evacuate out of the 2020 fire that occurred about a mile up the road from our exit in Parley's Canyon. And we were very late getting notification. The communication within the canyon is very poor. There's very poor cell service in there just because of the terrain. So probably less than half the people even can be contacted. We had signed up for reverse 911 calls. It never came. And the only notification we got was probably an hour and a half after the fire started. And we were contacted by people that were hearing it in the valley based on television news that mandatory evacuation of the canyon was required. We got out probably, we heard about an hour and a half after we got out, probably close to 2 hours after. By that time, there were probably a dozen fire trucks at the bottom. Hotshot crews were suiting up to go up the mountain. And heavy air tankers were already at work flying over our heads, trying to put out the fire. The fire burned within a half a mile of crossing our road at a point, elbow in the road near Justin Wild's cabin. Fortunately, the wind was not blowing in the opposite direction that day. In fact, it was very light winds, which were favorable. But wildfires will be driven by the wind, and we can't predict how this might happen. A second safety concern has to do with the heavy truck traffic, which would go directly in front of the mouth of Mount Air Canyon. Having heavy trucks conflict with passenger cars isn't a very good prospect. The other thing is, if you look at what happens down at the Kilgore mine, the current mine in Parley's, the trucks going westbound are entering the freeway at a straightaway, whereas exit 132 in Mount Air Canyon is on a curve. Any trucks entering the canyon will be conflicting with fast-moving cars. People drive that canyon like they're at racing at Monte Carlo. And I can easily see fast-moving cars trying to overrun a truck entering the freeway. So between these two things, public safety is at risk here. We're talking about lives here. And I think this needs to be taken into serious consideration. I've written letters to Director Baza, and I have copies here. Also have a letter to which had the same attachments to Executive Director Joel Ferry, because it's the Department of Natural Resources website going into Be Ready Utah, that with the same logo that's behind you there that is imprinted on this. So I can't see how the state of Utah could be absolved from any complicity in this if there is an accident or an incident. So anyway, this is my concern. I will leave this folder with any of you that are concerned. And we've also already had a meeting with Unified Fire on this issue, and they plan to come into the canyon with us next month to see what our helicopter evacuation issues might be or other means of escape. So I thank you for your time, and we appreciate your concern.
Thank you for raising your concerns. Could we have the next person come up? We do have a docketed item scheduled for 10, so could you please keep your comments to less than 5 minutes? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Justin Wild. Address is P.O. Box 520002, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84152. I'm here today to make a few comments about the Parley's Canyon and the Tree Farm gravel pit, or I-80 South Quarry gravel pit. First, I want to say thank you to the board for the things you've done thus far on this issue. As you've heard, there's over 100 cabins in the Mount Air Canyon. These homes, some of these are less than 2 blocks away from this mine, proposed mine site. All of them are within 1.5 miles away. These homes are built on steep canyon walls. There's rock outcroppings that sit above and around many of these homes. These are old homes. Many of them are on stilts. Our own home is on a slab concrete foundation with no footing. The U.S. Bureau of Mines performed studies on structures located within 1 to 4 miles of mines. They found structural damage occurs, in some cases liquefaction and slipping from foundations. There are thousands of homes that are within 4 miles of this mine site, not just Mount Terra Canyon, but Canyon Rim, Mill Creek, Sugar House, Immigration, Country Club area. All of these homes sit within 4 miles of this mine site. As I mentioned, in Mount Terra, there's dozens of homes on these stilts. My concern and the concerns of others is that these homes will not withstand frequent blasting from this mine site. Within 2 blocks away, many of these homes. My own home, again, sits on one side of a slope. There's a plateau, and then the other side of the slope is the mine boundary. So this blasting could be happening on the same hillside that my home's built on. You know, will we notice this? Right now, there's a Harper quarry mine that's about 2.5 miles away from us. And we do hear anyway, the thumping of blasting from that site 2.5 miles away. This is 5 times closer. I do believe that we will feel and be affected by this. I'm a supporter of private property rights, but not when one newcomer who claims that he also has property rights performs actions on his own property that substantially impinge on the property rights of myself and my neighbors and thousands of others. What's not clear to me is who's responsible to determine whether mining activity will threaten the safety of the nearby community. I believe it's oil, gas, and mining, the experts in mining. At some point in the past, some lawmakers, in their wisdom, wrote into their laws a right to be concerned about health and safety. The board and the division have been granted broad discretion to be concerned about the health and safety of the public. It's not OSHA or MSHA. It's not the DEQ or the DAQ. It's not the Salt Lake County. It's this agency that's responsible for mining operations in this state. I beg you to please take seriously your right and ability to consider these matters. There are thousands of homeowners who are looking to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. I believe there was someone else that wanted to speak.
Good morning. I'm Luann Schmidt, I'm a resident of Salt Lake County and cabin owner of Mount Air. Good morning and thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to speak. Let me introduce you to our newest grandson. Let's call him Matt. He's just 2 months old. He represents the generations that will be affected longest by the proposed tree farm mine. Our family loves the mountains. We hike, we bike, we gather, we celebrate, we create memories and are strengthened in the beautiful surroundings of our Wasatch Mountains. Salt Lake Valley and Mount Air Canyon in particular are very special to Matt's family and ancestors. On both my side and my husband's side of the family, ancestors from the Knoll family and the Smith family built some of the first cabins up Mount Air. For generations, Matt's relatives have breathed the clean mountain air, enjoyed sunrise breakfasts with birdsong and evenings by a campfire trading stories. Mount Air, we have always assumed, would be there for Matt and the generations that follow him, his children, his grandchildren. Perhaps we're wrong. Those generations are part of the 100-year proposal's timeline. Will this landscape be there for Matt? What of the air quality for Matt? Whether he's up at the canyon or down in his backyard at school, in the park, riding his bike, playing football? What will the excavation of massive amounts of limestone do to his lungs? Studies say that at present his life will be 2 years shorter. Will that cost to our health grow as more fugitive dust blows from this mine into his valley, into his family gathering place? Matt has mining in his family history as well. The Cardiff mine was preceded by the Jones family's Little Dora mine. Matt has downwinders among his relatives too. The 20th century's nuclear testing mistakes didn't just cost money or scenery. They cost literal lives. Lives that continue to be cut short because of short-sighted decision-making many, many decades ago. Today, I am asking you to give weight to Matt's future and to all of his generation. He won't be old enough to vote until your decision on Tree Farm's proposed mine is history. But in a family-friendly state where the Utah way is to think of others, not just of yourself, I do wonder if Matt's generation will look back on this day of decision and wonder why there was no one here to represent them. So I stand before you to represent them, the generations of the future. They want the mountains. They can only trust us to preserve their quality of life. We all want life elevated, not life excavated. We want solutions that don't sacrifice clean air and clean water, that don't decimate wildlife habitat and scar our beautiful surroundings, to which we turn for strength and respite into piles of rocks and dust. Please do not approve Tree Farm's proposed mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Or is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, that concludes the public comment period. Why don't we adjourn temporarily and reconvene in 10 minutes? That would be 10:15.